A beautiful home in Greenwich, summers in the Hamptons, a husband who kissed her cheek before leaving for work and returned home to a carefully prepared dinner. People envied her. They called her lucky. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that perfection is just another way of hiding decay, that the smooth surface of a lake can conceal something rotting beneath. He started working out obsessively, but never in their home gym. His phone, once left on the kitchen counter, was always with him, always face down. Catherine had seen enough marriages crumble around her to recognize the early signs of a man seeking a distraction. But she told herself it wasn't happening to her. David wasn't that kind of man. Then April changed too. Her sister had always been impulsive, reckless, living off the high of Instagram fame. Her brand was built on luxury, front row seats at Fashion Week, invites to exclusive yacht parties. But lately, Catherine had noticed something off. The extravagant lifestyle remained, but the brand deals were drying up. There were fewer sponsored posts, fewer tagged collaborations. And yet, April had new jewelry, expensive bags, weekends in Paris. Catherine hadn't thought much of it at first. But when April stopped showing up for their usual brunch dates, always texting, "Can't, last-minute sponsor event," Catherine started paying attention. There were no sponsor events. Nothing on April's social media suggested she was working at all. And then David came home and casually mentioned his work trip to Hawaii. He said it like it was an afterthought, barely looking up from his phone. "I'll be gone for 2 weeks next month. Big deal in Hawaii." "Last minute thing." Catherine nodded, sipping her tea, watching him carefully. David never did last minute things. His entire life was planned down to the hour, his calendar meticulously managed. He was lying to her, and the worst part was that he didn't even seem worried about getting caught. The next morning, after he left for work, she sat at her desk and pulled up their shared airline account. David's flight was there, booked under their joint miles. And so was a second ticket under the name April Morrison. Catherine stared at the screen for a long time, her pulse slow and deliberate, her mind detaching from the shock. She had been betrayed before. Small betrayals, the kind you forgive out of love, out of exhaustion. A forgotten anniversary. A white lie about a dinner meeting. This wasn't small. This was David using her, sleeping with her own sister, smiling in her face every day while planning a vacation with her family. She shut the laptop, exhaled slowly, and walked to the closet. She pulled out a suitcase, but she wasn't going anywhere. No, this wasn't about leaving. This was about erasing them. David and April thought they were clever, that they had the upper hand. But they had underestimated the woman who had built their perfect little world. They had no idea what was coming for them. Catherine wasn't interested in proof. She didn't need more receipts, hotel bills, or secret text messages. She knew. That was enough. What mattered now was what came next. She didn't storm into their parents' house demanding answers. She didn't throw April's designer heels off a balcony. She didn't wait around for David to come home and stammer out some excuse, because she already knew he wouldn't bother lying. He thought she was weak, thought she'd sit quietly while they humiliated her. They were so wrong. Catherine spent the morning setting fire to her old life. Not literally, at least not yet, but in ways that would cut deeper than any screaming match ever could. She emptied all their joint accounts, moving the money into a separate fund under her name only. She called the airline, reported her credit card as stolen, and canceled all the miles they had booked. The trip to Hawaii? Vanished. No first-class seats. No ocean view suite. She wondered how long it would take for April to realize she had been stranded. By noon, she was standing in front of her parents' estate, a towering colonial with sprawling lawns and the kind of wealth that made people feel invincible. She had grown up in this house, memorized every creaky floorboard, every hiding place. But now, it felt foreign, because inside, her family had sat around knowing, smiling, laughing, drinking their expensive wine, while her husband and her sister planned their little getaway right under her nose. She didn't bother knocking. She stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished wood floors. The house smelled like expensive candles and betrayal. From the sitting room, she heard voices, her mother's light, gossipy tone, April's laugh, her father's deep chuckle. Like nothing was wrong. Catherine walked in, and the conversation stopped. April was curled up on the couch, barefoot, scrolling through her phone, looking so damn comfortable. Their mother sat across from her, sipping tea. Their father barely glanced up from his newspaper. "Katie!" April's face lit up in a mockery of innocence. "What are you doing here?" Catherine smiled. Sharp. Unforgiving. She moved to the bar cart in the corner, poured herself a drink she didn't need, and took a slow sip before answering. "I was just wondering," she said lightly, "when you were planning to tell me you were fucking my husband." Her mother gasped. April's face drained of color. Their father finally lowered his newspaper, watching but not stepping in. "Of course not." April opened her mouth, then closed it. Then laughter. She actually laughed. "Catherine, you're being dramatic." The glass shattered before she realized she had thrown it. April flinched, shards of crystal skidding across the floor. Their mother shrieked, jumping up from her seat, but Catherine barely noticed. "I canceled your flights," she said, voice steady. "The trip's off." April's jaw clenched, but she recovered quickly. She tossed her hair over one shoulder, feigning nonchalance. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" Catherine took a slow step forward. "Because I was thinking about how I could react. I could take this to David's boss. I could show them the little offshore accounts he's been funding your lifestyle with. The ones they definitely don't know about." She let that sink in. "Or maybe I'll just burn your closet down while you sleep. That Hermes bag you love so much?" Ash. April's fingers tightened around her phone, but she didn't speak. Catherine took another step forward, close enough now to see the sweat starting to bead at her sister's temple. "You thought you could play me. You thought I'd sit there like some idiot housewife while you smiled in my face and fuck my husband. But here's the thing, April, you don't know what I'm capable of." The words were soft, almost sweet. Her sister swallowed hard. Then Catherine smiled again. "But you're about to find out." She didn't go home after confronting April. Home wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene, a place where her husband had kissed her in the mornings before crawling into bed with her sister at night. Instead, she booked a suite at the Waldorf Astoria using David's credit card, because why the hell not? From the quiet of a hotel room with plush silk sheets and a $500 bottle of champagne she had no intention of drinking, she started working. David had always been a little too confident when it came to money. He handled the finances, the investments, the accounts. He liked to explain things to her slowly, like she was a child who couldn't grasp market fluctuations. She let him. She let him believe she wasn't paying attention, that she didn't know where the real money was. But she did. She had always known. By midnight, she had accessed the offshore accounts. Not drained. Not yet. That would be too easy. Instead, she made a few strategic transfers. Not enough for him to notice right away, but enough that, in a week, when he finally did, he'd have no idea what the hell happened. She spent the next morning setting fire to everything in ways he wouldn't see coming. First, she sent an email to David's boss. A polite inquiry. Would the firm be reviewing the sudden appearance of certain undocumented assets? Surely an esteemed company like theirs had policies against this kind of thing. Next, She forwarded every suspicious bank transaction to the IRS. Because nothing in this world ruins a man faster than tax fraud. Then, she called a locksmith. Not for their house. No, David could keep that rotting mausoleum. She changed the locks at their lake house, the one he thought she had forgotten about. The one he and April had been using as their private retreat. April had laughed in her face when she confronted her, smug and untouchable. Let's see how smug she looked when she showed up for another weekend getaway, only to find all her things thrown in the lake. By noon, everything was in motion. And then, finally, she made the last call. Jane Sterling, came the smooth, amused voice on the other end. Tell me, Catherine, how much damage are we doing? She smiled, stretching out on the hotel bed. She watched the news that morning with coffee in hand, feet tucked under her on the couch of her Waldorf suite. It was a simple news piece, dry, factual, brutal. A tech investment firm under scrutiny for mismanaged funds. No names mentioned, not yet, but she knew the firm would connect the dots. By lunch, David would be getting calls, his partners demanding explanations. By dinner, he would be fired. She closed the laptop, satisfied, and left the hotel in a crisp white dress. There was still work to do. When she arrived at the boutique on Madison Avenue, the salesgirl recognized her immediately. Catherine Morrison was a regular. She had spent years perfecting the role of the devoted society wife, the kind of woman who bought diamonds for charity balls and hand-stitched linens for holiday dinners. She leaned against the counter, smiling as she handed over David's platinum card. I need a few things. Something extravagant, she said smoothly, tapping her nails against the glass display case. Oh, and charge whatever my sister picks out, too. April would be shopping later. She had no idea her big sister was footing the bill. The salesgirl nodded, beaming. Catherine left with 2 bags of nothing she needed. That wasn't the point. The point was to remind April that everything she had came from her. By the time she returned to the hotel, her phone buzzed with a message. James Sterling. 1 word. Done. Catherine exhaled slowly, her heartbeat steady. That meant the real surprise had been delivered. Not to David. Not to April. But to their parents. She had let them sit comfortably, sipping their imported teas, pretending they knew nothing. But they had known. They had welcomed David and April into their house, while she was still making his breakfast every morning. She had fixed that problem. A hand-delivered package. Nothing flashy, just a manila envelope with every piece of evidence inside. Pictures, emails, hotel receipts, a beautifully written note at the end. Thought you should know who you've been hosting for Sunday brunch. No signature. No explanation. They'd figure it out. She knew exactly how her parents would react the moment they opened that envelope. Her mother, ever the society woman, would clutch her pearls, her perfectly maintained world tilting on its axis. Her father, a man who valued legacy over loyalty, would sit in stunned silence, absorbing the sheer weight of what his youngest daughter had done. And April? April would realize, for the first time in her charmed, selfish life, that she had finally pushed too far. She didn't need to see it. She just needed to let it happen. That morning, she strolled through Central Park, letting the crisp autumn air cool her skin, watching the leaves turn. By now, David would have woken up in Hawaii, only to find his corporate email frozen, his phone lighting up with messages from his firm. A scandal he didn't see coming was already attached to his name, whispers circulating about mismanaged funds and offshore accounts. She imagined him standing on the balcony of his suite, gripping his phone, his face drained of color as he scrolled through the chaos. April would still be asleep, tangled in hotel sheets she didn't pay for, blissfully unaware that their vacation was already ruined. Not that Catherine cared. She had bigger things to handle. When she arrived back at the Waldorf, she found a gift waiting for her. A small, elegant box wrapped in black satin. No note, but she didn't need one. She smirked, lifting the lid, revealing the watch. Not just any watch, David's. The one she had flushed down the toilet. She let out a low laugh, turning it in her hands, feeling the weight of it. So James Sterling had gotten creative. He didn't just dispose of it, he had retrieved it. And now, he had sent it back to her like a trophy. She liked that. Tucking the watch into her purse, she poured herself a glass of champagne and settled onto the couch, ready for the next act of destruction. It arrived in the form of a phone call. Not from David. Not from April. From her mother. Catherine let it ring twice before answering, her voice smooth, unbothered. "Good morning, Mother." There was a beat of silence. Then, a breathless, frantic voice. "Catherine, what did you do?" She smiled, swirling the champagne in her glass. "I just told the truth," she said, voice light. "Something none of you seemed capable of doing." Her mother's voice wavered. "Your father, he's livid. This isn't something we can just ignore. You've put us all in an impossible position." Catherine laughed softly. "No, April did that when she decided to sleep with my husband." "Katie," she didn't let her finish. "And you let it happen. You sat there, every Sunday, playing hostess while they humiliated me behind my back. So forgive me if I don't give a damn about your position." Her mother sighed, the weight of her decisions, her cowardice, settling in. "Your father wants April to fix this." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do you suggest she do that? Unsleep with my husband?" A long silence. Her mother's voice dropped, softer, hesitant. "She's saying David convinced her it was temporary. That he was just using her to get to you." Catherine froze. Now that was interesting. She had never stopped to consider that April wasn't the final prize. That, in David's mind, she had just been the weapon. It didn't matter. David had played the game wrong. And he was about to lose everything. She ended the call without another word, setting the phone aside. She had one more thing to do. Picking up the watch, she pulled up a new email draft. Subject line, "Thought you might be missing this." She attached a photo of the watch resting in her palm, added no message, no explanation, just her signature. Then she hit send. David would see it. He'd know exactly what it meant. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. Catherine arrived at the penthouse suite of the Waldorf at precisely 8:45 p.m. James Sterling had arranged everything. A private meeting, no security cameras, no digital records. The man waiting for her inside wasn't just some lawyer. He wasn't a banker or an investor. He was the kind of man you called when you needed a problem to disappear. Sergio Romano. A man who understood loyalty and punishment in equal measure. She stepped inside, meeting his gaze without hesitation. He looked her over, assessing, as if trying to decide whether she truly had it in her to do what she was about to do. Catherine smiled. "You come highly recommended." He smirked. "James said you were ruthless. I like that." She took a seat, crossing her legs. "David and April took something from me. I want them to feel what that's like." Sergio leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping against the armrest. "You want financial ruin? Public scandal? Or something more permanent?" She let the silence stretch between them. Then, softly, she said, "I want him scared." Sergio's smirk deepened. "Now we're talking." 2 nights later, David woke up to the sound of his hotel door unlocking. He shot up in bed, heart pounding, adrenaline surging through his veins. He turned to wake April, but she wasn't there. The sheets were cold. She had never come back. His pulse hammered against his skull. He reached for his phone. Dead. That didn't make sense. He had charged it before bed. He grabbed the hotel landline. No dial tone. Something was wrong. And then he heard it. A slow creak. The closet door. His breath stalled in his throat. Every hair on his body stood on end as he stared at the door, slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness. Then, out of the silence, a low, amused chuckle. David ran. Catherine knew the exact moment David fled the hotel. Jane sent her the security footage. David barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, bolting down the hall like a hunted man. He had checked out within minutes, paid in cash, and disappeared. April was already gone. She had vanished 2 hours before him, escorted out by one of Sergio's men. No violence, no threats, just a whisper in her ear, a reminder that she had crossed the wrong person. By morning, both of them were ghosts. No money, no power, no safety. And Catherine? She was exactly where she belonged. At the top. She raised her glass to the skyline, feeling the weight of her victory settle in her bones. David and April had thought they could take from her. They had forgotten. Catherine Morrison doesn't lose. Not ever.